Hi, everyone. This is Work Made Human. I'm Nichole Mendez, Director of Talent Acquisition at BAM. And with us today, coming from New York City, correct me if I'm wrong?
The suburbs of New York, Connecticut.
East Coast, East Coast. I'm in Jersey. I get it.
This is currently not what I'm looking at out my window. It is very snowy and very cold.
Could you actually, did I pronounce your name correctly? Is it Nikhil Sethi?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Co-founder and CEO of Workgrounds.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here, first and foremost. Nikhil, we do this podcast because storytelling is core to BAM, right? As a PR agency, and every team has a very human story to tell beyond. So we know Workgrounds is a startup focused on, correct me if I'm wrong, automating and improving corporate group travel. So in your words, I would love to hear more. What story are you maybe currently telling and even hoping to tell in the future with your team?
Yeah. So quick background. I'm a second-time founder. Started a first company out of college. I was an undergrad at Northwestern in the ad tech space. We grew that from 2010 to 2018, and then we were acquired by Accenture. And at that point in time, the world was kind of changing and weird, right? And we were right during this COVID period. Work overall changed dramatically from the way I remember building a startup versus the way startups are built today. Everything has changed, both new technology, but the area that was really interesting to us was just like a lot of the human motions on how we built organizations, especially at the earliest stages, and then all the way through scaled organizations. And so I think COVID really had this interesting effect because for the first time, I think in a long time, people started asking the question of like, do we need an office? Do we need to commute to offices? What's this relationship between asynchronous work and synchronous work? And nobody had and I don't think there was a right answer, I should say. I don't think there was a perfect answer, but there was many different sort of sections on the spectrum that people landed. And, I think what was interesting to me is also going from the first company to the second company is, I got married in that middle, I had kids in that middle, and my relationship to work shifted, right? Where I think in the first company, identity, for me was very much connected to the company that I was building. And, as we started to see what are the sort of attributes of high performance companies, and especially at the earlier stages, we saw that there were really, really obvious and interesting patterns that you could implement to create organizations that took advantage of global talent, meaning being distributed and being remote, but also getting together at certain frequencies throughout the year. And so part of the initial concept of Workgrounds was how could we empower through tools the ability for organizations to balance both of those things, meaning we don't have to choose that we have to be in an office because we can't hire, because we need to gather, we need to be together. At the same time, organizations really wanted to pull from larger talent pools and be able to manage that. And so Workgrounds really at its core was about gathering. It's how do we sort of create this system of automation that allows people to get the benefits of in-person collaboration without trading off the beauty of asynchronous work.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned empowering because it sounds, we've all, well, maybe not all, maybe not everyone listening, but for those of us that can relate to living through COVID and feeling the changes from a workplace perspective, adapting was really important.
Mm-hmm.
You said empowering, which I think makes all the difference, right? And bringing meaning to whether it was virtual at the time or now we're seeing hybrid or returning to office.
Exactly. And even further, just on that, I think it's really interesting because there's this stark contrast between the words in office and remote. And I think sometimes we forget that there is actually a very large spectrum there, right? And, sometimes I talk to folks all the time and say well, we would never be remote because we have to, take advantage of all the brainstorming and internally, and we need to be together all the time. At the same time, we also realize that the moment you go from one office to two offices, however you define an office, you are effectively a distributed organization at that point. And so a lot of our thinking around gathering and in-person collaboration comes from this notion of not whether I'm remote or not, but whether I have multiple locations in whatever setup that I have. And so you even see a lot of the RTO'd organizations fall victim to how should we gather, how should we not gather, just because they have two offices in different places, right?
Yeah. Speaking of RTO, it's no secret that we're seeing it all over. It's like headline after headline, week after week. We're seeing the big tech giants and then obviously the companies following suit enforce more of the return to office.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of companies, well, I think for some companies, it is a way of doing kind of secret layoffs. But the point I'm trying to get at is regardless, we're seeing companies really enforce the RTO, but we're also seeing employees push back. And you've said numerous times that people miss connection, not the cubicles, it's the actual connection.
Yeah.
What do you think leaders are maybe misunderstanding the most about why people actually want to gather?
Yeah. So I think first you are right to suggest that RTO can oftentimes have different expected outcomes, let's say, whether it's the silent layoff, whether it's, I've seen many times the justification of an investment that they've made in real estate, for example, to say, hey, if we've got these leases, like we're not going to let them go away. But I think that there is an alternative solution. And so we see some of the, even scale organizations, the ones that come to mind to me right away are Automatic, for example, and Dropbox, that have actually done something really interesting, which is they've taken their existing footprint of real estate and said, could we reimagine these spaces in a way that are actually designed for this future work model? And in many cases, they've taken their real estate, not said we should get rid of it and we should move to a fully, distributed model and just enforce that way. But no, actually gathering is important, but gathering in a way that's effective for these teams is the right answer. So they've actually converted their spaces into different layouts, different structural setups designed for when teams get there. They actually have these sort of spiked collaboration moments. Coinbase famously has invented the surge concept, where they've turned all of their real estate and actually continuing to expand their real estate footprint, but reconverting all these spaces into moments of quick collaboration, and then everybody moves away and goes asynchronous over time, right? And so I think that there's some really creative approaches and solutions around how you could sort of manage RTO, because when you start to use binary terms, that's where I think employees get skittish and scared, right? It's not trying to take away something that you've been given. I think that's been the big challenge for folks is once you've entertained this idea of working from home, pulling everybody back into the exact historical model is what creates a lot of fear, right? But when we start to suggest that, hey, there is a model that still takes advantage of asynchronous time at home and really allowing that to persist. But we have these few moments throughout the year, throughout the quarter, throughout whatever frequency works for your organization, where we get together and there's a very explicit manner in which we design those get together moments. Because, also think of it, if I'm only going to see my colleagues once a quarter, those few moments better be really impactful, right? And so that's also where we wanted to think about our potential contribution as a company for Workgrounds is how can we take away all of the, excuse my French, bullshit and tax I have to pay to get people together, so teams can really refocus that time and energy to say and answer the question of, if I get 48 hours as a group, what makes those 48 hours so meaningful that the next 60 days, 90 days, 100 days can be really utilized in the most effective way, right? So I think it's a lot of it is language. A lot of it is, not using these very black and white terms about we're either fully RTO or we're fully remote and there's like nothing. It's a much more nuanced system that can be designed. And I think there's some really, really prominent leaders, and especially organizations that have invested in hiring leadership to think about these problems, that have invented some really cool solutions to really make that time meaningful, but also to make, because we want to make, the finance teams and executive teams happy, to also utilize the investments around real estate in a smarter way.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I read it and I think there's no one size fits all solution for teams. That's obvious. Definitely. BAM's fully remote.
Yep.
Met at MMD. So, we're big on the freedom too. It's one of our values to live life and have the liberty of not worrying about commuting and all the things. But when we're gathering, it's intentional. It's meaningful.
Yes.
So whether it is for a team that's hybrid and meeting once a quarter or twice a week, or maybe a team that's fully remote and has the 1 year retreat, once a year retreat. What is one small change you'd encourage leaders or these teams to make so that the corporate travel or the gatherings feel more impactful?
Yeah, I'd say I'll approach it from two different dimensions. So the first dimension I'd say is just in the organization itself, right? So oftentimes this type of work doesn't have a direct owner, right? So it falls to the hand raiser, it falls to somebody who already has a lot of full day responsibility and is now picking up another task, right? And so it almost becomes in some ways a second class citizen, right? And I mean all the things that are under the umbrella of where should we even go? How do we get there? Is this actually taking into account all of the specifications and needs of the team members, all the way from simple things like dietary requirements to accessibility requirements to, believe it or not, there's a lot of folks on teams that have never been on a plane before, have never traveled before. And that's not something that should be just taken for granted, right? And so I think a lot of it is around thinking about the initial problem of who owns this, right? Is this something that falls? I've seen so many flavors of, it's the executive assistant that picks this up. It's a chief of staff that picks it up. Sometimes there isn't even those functions in small organizations. And so it's just like the CEO is doing it, but like they're doing a million other things. And so a week before, we get a call saying, hey, I haven't booked the hotel rooms yet. What should I do? Oftentimes it's the team lead in many large organizations. And then in those cases, you're kind of head scratching and saying, well, this person is being compensated to do a particular job. And now I'm going to take 100 hours out of their, time and put it in going to source hotel rooms and book flights. And it's like, what are we doing here? So I think ownership of the work is a really important attribute because it means that the organization is taking this seriously and is also thinking about these moments of gathering, not as a check the box opportunity, but as something that's actually core to the fundamental culture of how that organization works, right? On the other side, I think the other thing that gets distressed through this process, because there's so many things that have to be done to get everybody actually together, logistically, I mean, that the actual content of what we're going to do when we're together almost becomes a in the Uber car, in the Uber ride from the airport exercise, right? And then you have everyone's captive attention, and it's sort of a scrambling moment of how do we actually use the time, and that obviously leaves negative taste in a lot of people's mind. The way I've said it and heard it actually described is, if we're going to invest in these moments of gathering for remote organizations or distributed organizations, these moments of gathering are equally massive positive spikes, but could also be massive negative spikes as well, right? Meaning you can do a lot of damage as an organization if you poorly construct these moments of gathering, because then it sort of breeds all these questions of, well, why the hell are we even doing this if no one's really thinking about this or caring about this? Or that was so unproductive. I just wasted a week of my life, traveling to this place and didn't get anything done. Or, there were certain personalities, dynamics on the team that were not taken into account that led to unproductive moments, right? Or leadership didn't know what the strategy was. So we got together and now we're even more confused about what we're supposed to do, right? So I think that refocusing all this energy that's applied to the logistics, the financials, the budgeting component, all the stuff that does need to get done and thought about, but really relieving those folks that are owning this and giving them time back to think about, the real reason of why we're doing this and what we're trying to produce as an outcome is really where the time should be spent. And so those are probably the two angles I would approach it from, and think about considerations if we're going to make these investments. Because the last thing I'll say, these are not cheap to do.
No,
right? These are materially.
Yeah, if you're going to spend the money, do it right.
And even if you try to do it cheaply, it's still fairly expensive, as a spike in the budget. So if we're going to make the capital contribution to this, why not do it in the best possible way we can?
Exactly. It's the little things that folks don't think about. As somebody with a lot of severe allergies, and you mentioned it.
There you go.
People don't think about it. People don't think twice.
Totally.
And not only is it your opportunity to strengthen the culture,
Mhm.
in your intentionality.
Yep.
It's just a kindness, right? It's a kindness to everyone there, a kindness to the team
It's
overall.
it's a respect for the team
Mhm.
question, right? And another example outside of allergies is like, if I have a fear of flying, maybe we shouldn't choose an international destination, right? Maybe someplace I can take a train or take a car or whatever, right? At a minimum, you may not be able to account for every need, but the act of just collecting that and listening to that goes a really long way for folks, right? And then I think, the other way to sort of handle that would be is to, if we can't conform to everybody's needs, create a remotely accessible option for some folks, right? Just so there's ability to participate. You may not get all the advantage of gathering, but at least you create some connectivity with the team.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm on LinkedIn all the time, as is the day of talent acquisition, and we're connected. And I saw you mention recently, or you posted
Hmm.
about an organizer who told you guest changes come in nonstop. I'm approving everything one by one, and it's eating my whole day.
Hmm.
So that post really just amplifies how the small constant changes can take over your calendar,
Totally.
least expect it, and when you least need it.
Totally.
So when it comes to leading people, what that you've seen, what small day-to-day frictions act in the same way and that they're quietly just draining the teams?
Yeah, I mean there are a lot, and I think the sort of like interesting way that a lot of people who, if you're listening and you've done or planned one of these types of events, you'll know is that if everything goes well, right? Um, oftentimes in this job, in this role, there isn't a lot of appreciation for how much work it took to get to that smooth outcome. But if one person has one issue, right? I checked in and the hotel was confused about my room, or, something in the room wasn't right, or the workspace didn't have good Wi-Fi or whatever, right? That becomes the only thing people will remember about the whole trip, right? And so, I think that there are these whole lists. I could probably give you like 800 different things that organizers and folks that put these types of gatherings, internal events together have to deal with. One of the ones is what you cited, which is you can, get the most beautiful venue, the most beautiful space, get all the content, do everything right. And then last minute things happen, right? Like somebody can't make it anymore. They got sick. So now that's another email, another DM, another back and forth, another thing I have to manage. Or oftentimes large organizations will have very complex ticketing systems implemented. So if I want to make a change, I have to go to like, ServiceNow or Jira or something, issue a ticket or Asana, and then somebody has to pick up that ticket on the travel team. Then they have to go take that ticket and do something with it. And then the hotel has to do something, and then the venue has to do. Then you have to confirm that. Then you have to go back to the ticketing thing and change the ticketing thing. The ticketing goes back to the person, and it's another DM, and it's just like,
And
oh
then
my
you're over
God, like,
it.
what am I doing? Right.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the things that we think, that are these iceberg of activities that are required, a lot of them can be very nicely packaged and automated to just be a button, right? And a lot of our ethos and thinking is that the organizer's responsibility doesn't go away in these areas, but should be greatly inverted, meaning the time I'm spending doing these things should feel so low cost and so frictionless that I have all the ability now, again, like we said earlier, to refocus my attention to, you know, what makes this gathering special for the culture of my organization. Software is never going to tell you that.
Yeah.
Only you, as the internal stakeholder, know how your team's heart, beats and what the rhythm is of that, and how to, invent a structure of a gathering that solves for that problem, right? And so, yeah, I think that there's just a lot of antiquated noise in organization of these types of gatherings that isn't anybody's fault, by the way. It's a lot of it is just the way the world has been built and invented around hospitality and venue management and all this kind of stuff that we think is ripe for a new coat of paint, let's say. Yeah.
In the same sentiment, you mentioned this is your second time running a startup, right? So you're a pro by now. What
Not,
has
not even close. But
change being the one constant, right? For most teams, but especially in the startup space, especially in the tech space. what has that taught you about how humans react to change?
Mhm.
And in your perspective, if you can speak to anyone listening from a leadership perspective, what advice would you have for them as far as managing people through change more thoughtfully?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is this. Uh, I'll call it kind of like the way you respond, right? The energy that you give in the response. So, when change happens, it's many times quite chaotic, right? And you can respond with chaos, or you can respond with listening and somewhat of a resolute, approach. And I think that's part of what I've learned too, is that I think after you see so many things over 15, 16 years of, doing this, there isn't really any unsolvable problem. It all reacts how you react, right? And so change is inevitable. Even since we started our first company, the world is entirely different, both in how we build companies, the technology stack that's available, the expectations that people have, how we recruit and their expectations through the process. And I think the only thing that, stays true is continuous learning, right? This willingness to drop what you held to be true in the past, right? Things that worked 10 years ago just don't work anymore, right? And trying to shove that through is just a fool's errand, right? And then I think the last part of it for me is like, especially in the teams that we built and the team we have today, is I learned so much about how we should build our org structure and culture from them. And so it's less about defining as a leader and more about taking the attributes and signal that's coming in and leveraging that input to design whatever the structure should be. So one thing's very tactical that we've learned is in being a more distributed organization with team members in every time zone, we've had to become a much more written down culture, right? And so what does that mean? That means we have to be able to articulate complicated ideas in a non-synchronous fashion, which means we have to be really good at writing. And writing clearly doesn't mean that you have to write a lot. Volume is not the answer, but it has to be such that somebody can really digest context without needing to have a physical live discussion, right? And that's a skill that is new and something that you have to build over time. And it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of discipline to do as well. But when you do that well, what ends up happening is that the 15 meetings that you had to have a week become one, and then that enables a huge new chunk of productivity that was not possible before, right? So very simply, our structure is we have one synchronous meeting a week. We have one monthly retrospective as a full organization where we beat up every part of the business, culture, everything, and can rewrite any rule that was previously written. And then we get together once a week, for 1 week, once a quarter, as a full organization in a random new location to basically retrospect the quarter, design the new objectives for the next quarter, and then we go asynchronous and execute. So that kind of three-pronged approach was only possible because of a deeply written down culture.
That perfectly aligns with, I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal article.
Oh,
I'll send it to you.
okay.
Storytelling. I forgot the name of the headline. Storytelling is the hot new job. And like they looked at not just storytelling as a title, whether it's like a community person or a concept person or a PR manager, but also looking at all the ways that the word is just written into the job description.
Yes.
Even in the people operation.
Yeah. And I think what will probably happen, just extending that thought, is, today we have heads of AI and whatever, heads of storytelling, apparently. These will become core requirements for every job function. Over time, storytelling should be embedded in every role, because if I'm going to be a good steward and a good IC or manager or leader, I have to be able to communicate, right? Fundamentally.
Yeah.
So I think that there's these sort of interesting ebbs and flows, right, that we go through where we forget the value of something. The world changes. We realize that new value was pretty important. We escalate it into a specific role because it's that important, and then it bleeds down back through the org. as
Yeah.
that becomes
Yeah.
successful.
And that's exactly, the article said something about like the oldest job of all time was storytelling. Suddenly it's back and it's the hot thing.
Totally.
To your point, right? AI is going to be everywhere. We're not going to outrun it. We have to work with it. And that's the opportunity for the
Yeah.
leaders and the humans, is to work with it, but bring that human storytelling
Totally right.
element into it, right?
That's our superpower as humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you know what? We're at time. I have just one fun question, if you'll
Okay.
entertain it. Nikhil, do you remember what you wanted to be when you were growing up? And do you see
Man.
any part of that in your day-to-day now as an adult?
Yeah, I mean, I remember two specific phases. First one was when I was very young, which was to be a garbage truck driver. I think I was very excited by trucks at that moment, and that felt like a very cool job. And then after that, I wanted to be like my dad. And my dad was actually a dot-com entrepreneur in the Bay Area,
Oh,
and got very infected at an early age by this concept or idea of, you can just like do things and start things. And if you keep going at it and you keep compounding at it and you find real value that's solving a problem, that can become something really exciting to work on. And so that sort of, became part of, like who I became over time, and give a lot of credit where credit is due. I was able to learn a lot from him. So yeah.
beautiful. Everyone, this is Nikhil, CEO of Workgrounds. Thank you so much for being here today, answering the questions. I have one more if you
Okay,
need
sure.
a 5-second thing,
Yeah.
or a word reply, or long if you prefer. What gives you hope about the future of work?
Wow, that's a deep question. I think there is this really interesting, maybe more philosophical answer, but as technology becomes, accelerates faster, momentum increases, more tools, more AI, more everything, there seems to be this really interesting, and we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but this new realization that creativity and knowing kind of what direction to point the engine is becoming more valuable, right? And in some ways, I was an engineer in college. I almost wish I'd spend more time in the arts and humanities, and actually would, advise my children and others to really spend time thinking about the attributes of humanity and life that, um, make us human, right? And bring that sort of flavor and style and culture to the work, to the technology, to how we articulate and storytell. And I think those skills, um, and I don't want to say that they were not valued in the past, but I think there was a different evaluation of them,
A different perspective. Yeah.
are now coming full force and front of mind as real differentiators and how people do their job, and what makes the difference between something that's great and something that's like remarkable. So that gives me hope, because that's something that, I think there's some folks that would argue could be machine driven in the future, but
Mhm.
today is a very squarely human thing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that answer.
Awesome.
It's
Thank
very
you for the time. Thanks for having me.
wise.